the setting for An Uncertain Justice is 1922, as she mentioned. And if you kind of look at the setting and what's going on in history at the time, it makes the story make more sense. And that's one of the first things I do when I'm writing a novel, is I will study the current events and what's going on in the country at the time and how those events may be affecting the people in the stories. And so this one is set against the backdrop of Prohibition. And the Durham Mine, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Durham Mine that was on Lookout Mountain in Walker County, at the time was as big as Chattanooga. Durham was. It was actually bigger than Chattanooga at the time. But it was starting to dry up. This mine that had employed all these people, it was a thriving community, was starting to, all the coal was out of it. And so you've got this mine dying. And so a lot of people losing livelihoods. You've also got a post-Civil War influence that's going on in 1922. A lot of the people still could remember, the Civil War. And there's, in Walker County, according to Dr. David Boyle, who's over the Walker County Historical Society, he says there's like 5 distinct areas within Walker County, and none of them ever agree on anything. And they're basically ungovernable, he said. But you've got the mountain people, and then you've got this trial going on in the valley. And so you've got a mistrust between the hill people from the people down the valley. The people down the valley were generally for the South. They were slaveholders. A lot of them were Masons. And the hill people were not, and they didn't really trust. They were Union for the most part. The man who was murdered here was Union. His family was Union supporters. They were all Mountain. So you've got that kind of a dynamic when you go to find a jury for a trial, that's coming into play. And I'll go into that a little bit more. And then you've also got that 3 lawmen within an 18-month period had been shot in Walker County. So all of this kind of sets the stage for this murder. I've kind of touched on this. The train ran from the Coke, what do you call it? Yeah, thank you. Up to Durham and back a couple times a day, and it would run the Coke down, and then or the coal down, and then the passengers could ride in the back of the train. There was a couple passenger cars, so that'll come into play as well. Okay, Joseph W. Morton, he's my second great-grandfather, and he was a deputy sheriff for the Durham Mine. So the mining community was run by the mines. They had their own stores, they had their own system of kind of governing things, and he was the deputy sheriff assigned to Durham. And he was also a Walker County deputy sheriff as well. And then he also ran a sawmill, and he built shanties. He was a very industrious man. He was about 60, 65 or something like that at the time of the murder. So this is the Morton family, quite a big group here. And this is probably 5 years before he died, something like that. Okay, and then what you've got on the other end are these Baker brothers, and they're 23 and 14. George is 23 and Ralph is 14. And according to the 1920 census, I looked them up and double-checked their ages and everything, because there was lots of controversy over their age. And so I looked them up, and that's the ages they were. And according to the census, George was working as a coal miner in the 1920 census. So he has basically been put out of work by this Durham mine closing up. And so they ran moonshine on the side, is what they did to make their money, because we got the Prohibition era, and they're going to run moonshine to earn a living, because the mine's not working out. Okay, the problem is that Joe finds their still, and he busts it up, but there's nobody there. He doesn't know who who owns the steel or anything, but he just gets rid of it, and they find out that he's done this. And of course they're not happy. So they're aware he's done it, and this leaves George with a wife, and a household to run and no money to do it with, and of course not too happy what to do. So he decides to rob the train, okay, that goes up and down Durham. And this is something that sort of, I guess it's debatable whether they were robbing the train, and this is part of what I had to research on this story, is did they go up the mountain to kill Joe Morton, or were they robbing the train and Joe Morton happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? So I kind of explored both of those angles here. But I believe they robbed the train, and here's the evidence of why I think they were going to rob the train. And even the prosecuting attorney alludes to them robbing the train in his remarks in the clemency hearing that's held. The fuses for the train that allow it to signal for help or anything, George had them. Okay, he'd stolen them. And the telegraph and the telegram wires on the evening of, on the afternoon of the murder, was a perfectly clear day in March, and they were working fine, but within an hour of this situation, they had been put out of commission. So they'd either been cut or something mysterious had happened to them. George is pulling out a gun all over the train, trying to get people to drink the whiskey that he's got, but he's so drunk, he flubs the train robbery. So they carry, the conductor gets the two brothers to go to the back, and Ralph, the younger brother, takes his older brother's gun. He assures the conductor he can handle George. George will be okay, he's just a little slosh, we're going to get him off the train. So they put him off in Durham. Okay, so the question is this premeditated or not? And I kind of leave it to the reader a little bit to decide, but the basic things that run into this that you want to look at is that Joseph Morton just happened to be at this train station. His daughter had come up the mountain to meet him that day with her little girl who had hurt her arm, okay? And the doctor was in Durham. So they went up together on the train and had the little girl's grandfather, Joseph Morton, meet them there at that train depot. And the train depot is where it all happens. So he's meeting Mary Ann, and it's just kind of a coincidental situation. I don't see how the Bakers could have known that Mary Ann hurt her arm that day and would be at that location. But here's some things to think about. The Baker boys are put off at Durham. The conductor yells, "Arrest them." They've got a gun. He wants them taken care of because they're getting off the train with this gun. And they dare Joe to arrest them. They basically say, "You arrest us if you can." They cuss him out. They egg him on. And George starts pushing at Joe. But George is again so sloshed that when he pushes him, he trips and falls in a ditch. And Ralph, the younger brother, is standing behind Joe and shoots him up underneath here. He has roughly 3 shots in his neck and chest areas, and head, neck, and chest areas. But Joe, on the other hand, every one of his shots go wild. So he never hits anything. They ping off the train, they go in there's not a single shot that he pulls off successfully, which to me indicates that he was hit first, right? You got a lawman could not hit anything if he had shot first. So Ralph is definitely, everybody admits that Ralph shot. Even Ralph admits he shot. But there is conflicting stories on whether George even had a gun. Did he give it to Ralph when he got off the train? Or did he have it? Some people say he had it and then he shot, and others say he didn't. So you have all these different things coming into play here. Before they go to trial, they're almost lynched. George is almost lynched twice, and Ralph is almost lynched one time. And if it hadn't been for the man who runs the mining community stopping it, they probably would have been killed beforehand. Finally, the trial takes place on April 1922, and it's just about a month after the murder, if even that. And it only takes them 3 hours to go from jury selection to a verdict, which to me seems amazing. And both boys are sentenced to hang approximately a year later.